With sound.
Can you share it with sound, please? Because we can't hear anything.
Organizations and my
But
Sorry, can I
start
come in
again
just
with the
for
sound.
Aspects of well-being.
guiding? And just close the sharing and reshare with using the tab.
Africa and South
You
Asia.
can find the option.
In Africa and South Asia, climate change and poverty are defining challenges of our time. Climate change is dramatically impacting these regions, even though they have contributed less than 10% of cumulative global greenhouse gas emissions. Despite the fact that worldwide, 1.3 billion people have emerged from extreme poverty in the past 25 years, 400 million people in sub-Saharan Africa still live on less than $1.90 a day. Climate change threatens decades of progress and intensifies pre-existing inequities. It especially harms women and children and amplifies gender inequality. Children born in sub-Saharan Africa in 2020 are projected to experience 6 times more extreme climate events than those born in 1960. These challenges, along with climate-magnified disasters like the recent flooding in Pakistan, threaten the lives and livelihoods of millions. But solutions are at hand. If we address poverty and climate change simultaneously and synergistically, we can reduce the impacts of climate change and contribute to socio-economic development. Project Drawdown has identified 28 of our climate solutions that also substantially help alleviate poverty and enhance multiple aspects of well-being. The solutions focus on improving agriculture and agroforestry, protecting and restoring ecosystems, adopting clean cooking, providing clean electricity, and fostering equality. For example, growing trees and annual crops together, a powerful climate solution, can boost income and food and water security and provides benefits for education, health, gender equality, and energy. Similarly, providing clean electricity and adopting clean cooking can address energy poverty as well as improve networks, health, and gender equality, increase income and work, and boost educational outcomes while preventing hundreds of gigatons of greenhouse gases. How can we use this knowledge to address the dual climate and poverty crisis together? We have a window of opportunity to harmonize policies and align funding to ensure a brighter future for people and the planet. Policymakers and leaders in low and middle-income countries can simultaneously achieve low-carbon economic growth and accelerate progress toward reaching their sustainable development goals by prioritizing these climate mitigation solutions in their national climate plans. For instance, Rwanda has included climate-smart agricultural practices in its national climate plan. This contributes to climate goals and also increases income, enhances food and water security, and boosts climate resilience, especially in vulnerable communities. In low and middle-income countries, climate finance institutions, philanthropists, businesses, and investors can prioritize strategies that boost well-being and mitigate climate change. They can also advocate to fulfill funding commitments to meet rising adaptation and mitigation needs in low and middle-income countries and ensure that climate finance is additive to existing official development assistance commitments. Yet current climate investments are nowhere close to what is needed. In Africa, for example, approximately $250 billion is needed annually to help countries implement their national climate plans. Climate change and poverty are urgent problems. To solve them, policymakers and decision makers must consult and collaborate with leaders from local communities, indigenous peoples, women, and youth. By taking action to address climate change and poverty together today and fulfill urgent climate finance needs in Africa and South Asia, we will shape the well-being of millions of people for generations to come. For more information, see drawdown.org/drawdown-lift.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'll just wait 1 second until the PowerPoint slides are up, but thank you for being with us here today. So, hi, everyone. I'm Carissa Patron-Courier, and I work with Project Drawdown as the program coordinator with the Drawdown Lift team. First off, I wanted to thank the International Center for Climate Change and Development and Independent University of Bangladesh for organizing this great conference and bringing various stakeholders together to advance conversations and action around locally led adaptation. There is French and English interpretation available, so you can either click the English or French button at the bottom of your screen. Closed captions are also available for your convenience as well. So as we begin the session, I'd like to invite you to add your name, organization, affiliation, and location to the chat. Throughout our time together, you're welcome to add any questions that you might have to the question and answer function throughout the session. Thank you all again for joining us. And you just saw a little bit of the video that was summarizing key findings from Project Drawdown's Climate Poverty Connections Report, which identifies human well-being co-benefits from 28 of Project Drawdown's solutions. And I'll be talking a little bit about that later. So today I am privileged to be here with you all to welcome you to the session, Intersectional Solutions that Advance Locally Led Adaptation, Climate Mitigation, and Human Well-Being. So during the next 90 minutes, I will take you through a brief presentation to share key findings from the Project Drawdown Climate Poverty Connections Report, and then we'll hear from three amazing panelists today as they share wisdom on how climate solutions advance locally led adaptation, boost human well-being, and mitigate future emissions as well, particularly for and with those who are most impacted by climate change. So I wanted to take a moment to recognize all of the women who are leading on climate in honor of celebrating International Women's Day this past Wednesday, as women should be celebrated every single day. So today, I'm joined by Chigozie Nweke-Esi, who is the Strategic Intelligence and Africa Program Lead with REN 21, based in Paris, France. He is an economist and a geographer working on climate issues, specifically renewables, financing, governance, and energy transition with a focus on the African continent for over 12 years. I'm also privileged to be joined by Sadia Rahman, who is the technical coordinator at the Center for Reproductive Rights. She is also the youth focal point for Family Planning 2030 in Bangladesh, and she has been working around SRHR, sexual and reproductive health and rights, and climate change agenda for several years now in Bangladesh. Her project, School of Impossible, won the Gates Institute Ingenuity Fund last year. So thank you for joining us as well. And last but not least, we have Komi Maglo, who is the executive director of OPAS Togo, which is the organization for the promotion of agroecology solidarity. He is a gender and climate activist and works as the director of the agroecology farm school that builds capacity of rural populations on climate change adaptation solutions. So thank you so much for being here today. And I'd also like to thank my colleagues, Yusuf Jamil, who is supporting us today, who is an associate scientist with Project Drawdown and a fellow co-author of the report, along with Ayana Bodhi, who works with Drawdown Labs, who supports corporate climate action to scale solutions and then also encourages employee climate action. And I'd also like to thank our interpreters today as well. So first, I'll start with a poll. You can just drop your answer into the chat. I would like to know from our audience, what is your area of focus or interest? Is it locally led adaptation, mitigation and renewable energy, food security and agriculture, resilient livelihoods, or gender, youth, and social inclusion? And it can be a mixture of some of them as well. And it should be A, B, C, D, E. But while you are dropping that into the chat, I'll just move on to the next slide. So in order for countries to mitigate future climate hazards, address pre-existing inequities, and advance sustainable development goals, policymakers and decision makers in low and middle income countries in the global south, climate finance institutions, philanthropies, and the private sector together must work alongside and with local community members to boost locally led adaptation while also contributing to mitigation and improving human well-being, particularly in rural communities in Africa and South Asia. So what is Drawdown exactly? That will be kind of the focus of our presentation today, but we'll also not only address mitigation, but also have a large focus on adaptation today as well. So drawdown refers to the future point in time when levels of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere stop climbing and steadily start to decline. So this is Project Drawdown's mission, is really to support the world in reaching drawdown. So Project Drawdown is a US-based organization, and we are best known for the book Drawdown, which came out with many different solutions to, when acted upon together, can help the world reach drawdown in various sectors. And we're a leading resource both on solutions and strategies on how to implement those solutions. So we recognize that there is a dichotomy here. First and foremost, high emitting countries must rapidly reduce their emissions and levels of consumption. And at the same time, low and middle income countries must be able to develop in ways that they see best fit to meet the needs of their communities. And first and foremost, led by local leaders. So Project Drawdown solutions are currently available, financially viable, have proven potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and have enough data to model it. So while Project Drawdown is mitigation focused, there are many, many of the solutions that have proven co-benefits for climate adaptation as well. And our framework recognizes that there are major systemic issues that need to be changed in order to reach drawdown. So these solutions, when taken together, can really help to multi-solve for some of the most pressing needs that our communities face today: gender inequality, systemic injustice, and more. So Drawdown's framework really focuses on enhancing natural sinks, reducing the sources of greenhouse gases that are in the atmosphere by shifting electricity production, increasing energy efficiency, reducing food waste and loss, and more. We also have a few solutions that really address those systemic inequities in society through people-centered solutions. One of them being meeting everyone's desired need for family planning and ensuring access to universal and high-quality education for everyone. So when taken together, sources, sinks, and society, we can really collaborate on a global scale to address climate change together. So kind of now shifting gears to focus on Drawdown's Drawdown Lift's work, we recognize that climate change and extreme poverty are inherently linked, and you can't really separate the two. Particularly women and children are more vulnerable to natural disasters and commonly live in regions that have been and are projected to be most impacted by climate change. So we as a LIFT team work with leaders from around the world to deepen the collective understanding of the links between both climate change solutions and poverty alleviation, particularly in rural communities in Africa and South Asia. So we have focused on 28 of the 93 Project Drawdown solutions that have multiple co-benefits for addressing mitigation, adaptation actions, and human well-being, and supporting emerging economy countries to pursue renewable, low-carbon development, while also addressing socioeconomic needs of their populations. So moving ahead, it's really important to frame this conversation in regards to vulnerability and disproportionate impact. So the impacts of climate change vary dramatically across regions and across countries and social groups due to systems of oppression, whether it be colonialism or capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy. We must recognize that these systems need to be completely, unshoveled so that we are able to address the systemic inequities that have continuously harmed people when it comes to climate change and other problems. So as I said before, women and people experiencing extreme poverty, Indigenous peoples, ethnic minorities, and persons with disabilities are typically those who are most socially disadvantaged and have the least amount of access to necessary resources to be able to protect themselves from climate change and address the issue at scale as well. So while people experience poverty in gender-specific ways, the adverse effects of climate change are also strongly gendered. And I want to make it clear that, we talk about vulnerability in women a lot, but women must be able to fully participate in all spheres of life. And when we are able to do so, particularly in climate negotiations and community planning, that is when we are able to really address climate change together. And as the video had mentioned, children are also disproportionately impacted by climate change. Babies born in 2020 in Africa, for example, are projected to experience around 6 times more extreme weather events than over their lifetimes than those who were born around 80 years ago. So moving forward, you can see that we have 5 different solution groups that we focus on in the Drawdown Lift report: improving agriculture and agroforestry, adopting clean cooking, fostering equality, providing clean electricity, and protecting and restoring ecosystems. So as I mentioned before, while Project Drawdown solutions are more so focused on mitigation, the solutions that we focus on in the Lift report are also co-benefits for adaptation as well. In order to assess the evidence of these 5 solution groups on poverty alleviation, we looked at 12 different dimensions of human well-being that we pulled from and borrowed from the donut economics framework for a few different reasons. One of them being its adaptability and also its focus on gender equality. So we evaluated the evidence of these 5 different climate solution groups that you'll see on the left-hand side. And we reviewed over 450 peer-reviewed papers and white papers to really summarize the human well-being co-benefits of these climate solution groups. So you'll see on the right-hand side then the co-benefits for the dimensions of human well-being. Those found in blue are stronger, and those found in gray are more so ripple effects or indirect benefits. So, for example, in order to really address both climate and poverty together, co-benefits such as income and work, better health, gender equality, and education are some of the key human well-being indicators there. So our speakers today will be focusing on electricity, agriculture, and also the family planning and education. So energy is one of the most important things when addressing climate change and poverty together. There are around 570 million people who continue to lack access to electricity. And a recent study of linkages between multidimensional poverty and electricity found that people in countries with limited access to electricity also suffer from high food insecurity, lack access to improved water and sanitation, and also experience low levels of income and work, and also have poor health outcomes. So providing access to clean electricity not only has potential to reduce emissions as well, but also has the ability to transform more remote communities, under-resourced communities, and vulnerable communities as well. And for example, Bangladesh, I can lift up as a really great example of championing off-grid and microgrid solar photovoltaics, which is a great example of really being able to address both climate and poverty together, while also boosting locally led adaptation as well. And solar pumps have also been shown to improve food security and access to clean water as well. And off-grid solar is also able to then enhance the quality of health services in remote areas, among a lot of other things. So shifting to agriculture and agroforestry, this is a really important solution group, particularly for rural communities. And changing the way that we grow food is critical for not only addressing climate change, but being able to continuously to provide good, nutritious food for our communities for years to come. And for example, in Africa, 21% of the population today experiences undernourishment, while in Asia, around 9% of the population is still undernourished. Improving agriculture is a key pathway for eliminating both poverty and hunger. And around 1/3 of the global population experiences moderate or severe food insecurity today. So the World Bank economists actually estimate that improvements in agriculture are around 11 times more effective at reducing extreme poverty in sub-Saharan Africa than investments in other sectors. So this is something that we'll take kind of a more deeper dive into with one of our panelists. Women's secure land tenure is another really important component of protecting and restoring ecosystems. So land tenure, specifically for Indigenous peoples, local communities, and women, is an enabling factor that really helps generate many, many co-benefits for human well-being and protecting ecosystems. So it's astonishing still that today around 85% of women lack the right to own land, even though women farmers make up about 40% of the agricultural labor in low and middle income countries. So land ownership is really directly related to land tenure, and secure land tenure really increases probability that farmers will adopt sustainable land use practices and have better ecological outcomes and food security in the long run. So fostering equality is the last solution group that we'll talk about today, which one of our panelists will highlight. And that is really focused on including voluntary and rights-based family planning and access to universal and high-quality education. And this solution in particular yields co-benefits for all 12 of the dimensions of human well-being, more than any of the other 5 groups of climate solutions that I had mentioned. So in sub-Saharan Africa, about 30% or 100 million children and adolescents do not attend primary or secondary school. 3/4 of children who never enter primary school are girls from rural and under-resourced communities. And households in which no girls or women have completed at least 6 years of school make up nearly half of the people experiencing multidimensional poverty globally. So education is crucial. And also meeting the contraceptive needs of women and men reduces maternal mortality and has also numerous benefits. Around 218 million women of reproductive age want to avoid becoming pregnant, but are not using a modern method of contraception. And rights-based voluntary family planning and high-quality education are essential for enhancing resilience and climate adaptation as well. And one of my colleagues can drop a link in the chat on a policy brief that talks about just this. But just to be clear, family planning and ensuring that everyone's needs are met in a way that centers bodily autonomy and rights is not in itself a climate mitigation solution. It is rather the outcome of family planning or slower population growth over time that is then considered in our modeling to be one of the climate solutions. So based on the modeling, about 55% of the projected CO2 reductions between 2020 and 2050 from this solution would come from low and middle income countries, where the rest of the 45% would come from high income countries. So we are in no way advocating for small families or anything of the sort. We're really advocating for bodily autonomy and for people to have access to then have that voluntary family planning that they need. And while we agree that, mitigating climate change requires immediate emissions reductions and transformation, especially in high income countries, it's really important to understand that we are not advocating in any way to restrict fertility, or we completely advocate against coercive measures to address social and environmental problems, but really center bodily autonomy in this work. And we really need to focus on reducing consumption because that is one of the primary drivers of climate change. But we do also have to recognize that population is a key variable in most climate models. So we believe that every person here where I'm sitting in the United States and in other places as well, should be able to make decisions about their fertility through the realization of access to both family planning and education as well. So in summary, climate mitigation and socioeconomic development can and must occur simultaneously. There is solid evidence that climate solutions can generate multiple co-benefits for well-being, adaptation, and poverty alleviation. And addressing these things together, particularly around income and work, health, food security, education, gender equality, and energy, when done together, would be very transformational in helping to alleviate poverty and address mitigation, but also really focusing on increasing resilience to current and future climate change impacts. So if properly designed and implemented, policies for low carbon resilient growth can also help address poverty and inequality and enable millions to live a more safer, more inclusive and prosperous life. So, addressing extreme poverty and addressing climate change must be done together and must be complementary. And with that, my colleagues will drop a link in the chat about the LIFT report if you'd like more information, and there's also a fact sheet as well. But I will now turn it over to our great panelists who will now provide examples of some of the things that I've talked about, but from their own perspective, and share ideas with you on how these triple duty solutions can also prioritize locally led adaptation. So Chikosi, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carita, for giving that very nice overview. Yeah, so I just want to start from the angle of energy, as Carita highlighted. Because renewable energies is part of climate mitigation, and of course, part then of what we're trying to do here to solve climate change. And this is what Rent into One also does. Next slide. So I'm going to think a little bit while describing what we do, to also kind of highlight some ways we strategically try to achieve this pushing renewable energies to the forefront for climate mitigation, and also touching on some topics on how renewables can also directly touch on poverty alleviation and better well-being. Yeah, next slide. Yeah. Next slide. Yeah, so I think I wanted to start with strategic intelligence, what we call strategic intelligence. So we find that in pursuing some of these things, in pursuing our pursuits for climate mitigation, especially from renewables angle, we find it difficult to be strategic in our actions, in our planning, in order to really achieve renewable energy leaderships. The essence of this is actually then to find blind spots, that is really to identify those areas, whether in poverty alleviation endeavors or economic development, more broadly speaking, where renewables can actually play a role, and then try to, which we would then call windows of opportunity, and then try to find a way to really then make a case for renewables. And I think this is what we do using AI tool. Next slide. Yeah, we also, this is then what we bring in to discuss more broadly with our community, which are quite diverse. So we handle issues, of course, we create a space for interaction between players from all levels. Local, community, national, and international levels can come together to have a debate on some of these issues. Let's say how renewables really connect to solving poverty alleviation and economic development on the ground in several countries in Africa. Of course, some of these issues also very much highlight what is going on in other developing countries as well. Current series is looking very closely to how renewables can actually create local economic value creation. You see, so local economic value creation, of course, means lesser poverty, more economic development, more jobs, and all kinds of security. So we finished our food security series last month. And then we were really having really nice discussions then on what roles renewables can actually play in securing Africa's food future. Some of the highlights of it is, most times this is not really common to many people. So there is a disconnect between renewable energy players and then farmers, so that you don't really see, farmers on the ground don't really see how renewables can actually benefit them. But of course, we know that renewables can really be used to advance irrigation of farms. It can use to improve mechanization. And so many other factors that renewables can actually play a role in the agricultural space. And then when we have better productivity in agriculture, of course, this also then means that you have naturally food security. And when you have food security, it also touches on health. It also touches on education and so many other socio-economic indices. We also would look at health later this month on the 22nd. Maybe I will share the link later with the organizers to also share it with your group more widely, where we would see how renewables can actually play a role in reducing health risks and deaths and mortality actually in developing countries. But we are going to focus on Africa, of course. So renewables, what kind of roles can it play? I mean, we knew about what happened with COVID-19, and how mini grids were quickly deployed in many health centers, and also how it was interesting that solar fridge was used to store vaccines. So those kind of applications need to be highlighted more to see how climate mitigation endeavors, such as renewables, can actually go a long way to helping economic development. So health as well, not just health, we also have education, as I've also mentioned earlier. Education, when you have lighting systems, good lighting systems, or good energy that can actually provide power for computers in the system that students are able to then understand. This is something that is also quite interesting. This is also what we try to do and what we call Renewable Africa. And we'll share more information to the audience later. Next slide. One of the things we gathered from our strategic intelligence work is that minority voices are not really heard. Whether voices of local African countries and also people in developing countries are not really commonly heard. And so we started what we call a campaign, Energize Africa campaign. And we try to ask people to move to promote renewable energy leadership. And we're already beginning to get some voice. We're doing it in two themes. One is that renewables build up economics. That is, with this logic that renewables can actually improve economic development. Then we also use the logic that renewables actually dismantles the current system to create a more inclusive growth, including women and youths as well, so that there is job creation for women and women. So it kind of gives another chance to reset the already existing system. So this is what we have both in French and English, and we circulate it, and it's growing. So we can also call on you, if you have nice voices, to also, of course, take part in this. Next slide. So I want to also thank you so much and see if there are also any suggestions from the team. You can put it on the chat instead. And as we also go forward. Thank you so much for your time. I hand over to you, Carissa.
Thank you, Chigozie. You made some really great points about how renewables can really advance equality, and specifically around women and girls too. With that, I would love to pass it to Sadia Rahman. You can take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sadia Rahman, and I work for the Center for Reproductive Rights as a technical coordinator. And I'm also the youth focal point for Farm Planning 2030 in Bangladesh. So when I started working around SIHR in Bangladesh several years ago, then me and my team started to connect climate change as one of the fundamental issues that is interconnected with sexual and reproductive health and rights, especially the regions that is near to the coastal belts of Bangladesh. When we are taking strategic decisions around our organization, we noticed that those decisions actually was directly connected to individual lives that are living in those areas. For example, we found out that there were adults and girls who were getting married right after a big disaster, because it was easier to cut down the household cost by getting married the adolescent girl of the family after any disaster. And also in those climate affected areas, there was a scarcity of safe drinking water, where the adolescent girl and the woman of the household are the major responsible person to fetch water from a very distant places, and there are associated risk when they are actually going to those places to collect water, and they're coming back to their houses. So from that initiative, I used to lead one of the organizations called Light to Life. I was their program director. So we initiated one of the projects that's called Project Impossible. So impossible, the I am in the impossible was in brackets, so which meant I am project I am possible. So luckily that project won the Bill and Melinda Gates Institute's Ingenuity Fund award in 2021. And with that grant, we actually worked in 4 divisions of Bangladesh, where we actually worked around SIHR and climate change education with 5,000 young people. And we had an initiative called Festival for Change. In that Festival for Change, we tried to connect the researchers around SIHR and climate change, also the policymakers, the ground level activists around climate change and SIHR, where the Festival for Change was a platform where all these young people and expertise can come along and have a dialogue together. Because while working in those particular areas, we had noticed that young people were getting affected by the climate change on a daily basis, but they couldn't, and that was affecting their sexual and reproductive rights as life as well. So when we started to connect those issues through different educational sessions of the project in School of Impossible, we're identifying that they are actually living that life that is impacted by the climate change, and they do not know that this is the impact of climate change because they didn't have any basic climate education. They didn't know what is climate change, why these cyclones are happening so frequently, which didn't used to happen earlier, why the scarcity of safe drinking water is increasing day by day, why the salinity in their lands and water are increasing day by day. So when we started to actually establish the intersectionalities between those issues, they are actually realizing, oh, we know this is actually happens to me, this actually happened to one of my friends. So with that knowledge, they actually got the opportunity to have a dialogue with the policymakers, where they actually presented their present condition and what they want out of that dialogue. They presented different demands in front of the policymakers, and also the report that was generated out of that Festival for Change was actually presented in front of different policymakers and the government structures. Another interesting thing that that project actually focused, that project actually was disseminating information and education through creative mediums. For example, songs, poetry, drama, and painting. So we in the Festival for Change, there was a session called art therapy, where all of the general participants of the event were given brushes and colors and a canvas. So they were asked to draw a connection between their life and the climate change happening around them. And there were so creative answers by them. And then we had our own art therapist who actually then did a connection between all those paintings. So it was a kind of a art therapy that worked around the mental health issue as well, because we actually connected the sexual and reproductive health and rights, mental health, and climate change together into that project, because these 3 intersectionalities are neglected issue in Bangladesh and are so stigmatized even in local level and also in national level. So we wanted to address that. And when we talk about mental health in Bangladesh, mostly there is no mental health in Bangladesh. There are 2 states only: either you are sane or either you are insane. So we actually wanted to break that stigma in local level as well, that the trauma that mostly young people are going through, particularly for migration due to climate change, and one of the research says that by 2050, 1 from every 7 people will be displaced. So due to climate change. So it has actually started. A big number of people are coming to big cities because they are displaced due to climate change. So the quality of their life is actually dropping day by day when they are leaving the cities. Usually they are living in a slum. So in the slums of big cities, the quality of life and the access to wash, access to other basic fundamental rights is so difficult to access. So that actually affects the mental health of any adolescent and young people that is associated with that migrated family. So we actually connected those migrated families, internally displaced people in different cities of Bangladesh due to climate change. So this was mostly my work around research and climate change. And when working as a technical coordinator at the center, what we are doing, we are actually directly working in the Rohingya response of Bangladesh. And one of our major goal out of this intervention is to establish sexual and reproductive health and rights as a basic human rights, which it is, but all of our government, donor, and the global community has to address it, especially who are working directly in the humanitarian setting. So this is our goal. And also, while working there, we have actually started to notice that there is a big gap and demand for climate education, and also how climate are actually affecting the Rohingya refugees as well, which is one of the biggest humanitarian settings in the world currently. So, so I think this has been my work, and I have been trying to establish these interconnections between climate change. Because one thing I always say that what actually meant to happen out of climate change has already happened for the countries like Pakistan, like India, like Bangladesh. They are already impacted. So there is nothing much we can do right now to stop that impact. But what we can do, we can educate people, we can aware people, and we can mitigate that effects. And for that, we need collaborative approaches and need to identify and address intersectional agendas that is affecting lives directly. So that's what I have been doing pretty much so far. So I think that's all from me now, and I'm really looking forward to a discussion, including Carissa and other panelists.
Thank you, Sadia. The one thing that really stood out to me was that 1 in 7 people will and are already being affected by climate change and will have to relocate. So that's something that, yeah, we just have to continue to be mindful of. And in high income countries, reducing emissions and reducing consumption. And then in countries who are most impacted, just educating your fellow, neighbors, which is the biggest part. So thank you for what you shared. Now I would like to introduce Komi, who is the Executive Director of OPAS, and over to you.
Ok, merci beaucoup. Merci à chers panélistes. Et oui, je suis Maglo Komi, je suis le directeur exécutif de OPAS, Organisation pour la promotion de l'agroécologie solidaire. Et nous sommes basés au Togo, nous précisément en Afrique de l'Ouest. Et je vais partager avec vous nos expériences pratiques de terrain en ce qui concerne l'adaptation face au changement climatique. Nous avons également un lien vidéo qui sera présenté dans le chat et sur tout ce que nous avons eu à faire. Vous savez, notre organisation travaille avec la communauté à la base et sur les questions du changement climatique, les accompagner pour leur adaptation face à ce changement climatique. Et du coup, nous travaillons dans 3 grands domaines, à savoir l'agriculture biologique durable, et l'environnement et l'entrepreneuriat social. Et nous travaillons aussi, nous prenons le domaine de l'agriculture biologique durable. Nous travaillons avec les femmes, les jeunes, et à la base sur les bonnes pratiques agroécologiques, à savoir l'utilisation du compost dans la restauration écologique des terres. Et vous savez, aujourd'hui, l'un des effets du changement climatique, c'est l'appauvrissement des sols, la dégradation des sols due à l'utilisation des produits chimiques, des engrais chimiques que nos populations utilisent dans leurs activités agricoles. Et au fur et à mesure qu'ils le font, on se rend compte que les terres deviennent de plus en plus pauvres et que cela n'arrive plus maintenant à donner le nécessaire en termes de rendement agricole que ces femmes ou ces agriculteurs espèrent. Et en plus de cela, nous avons remarqué également que les gens oublient les bonnes pratiques et que nos populations le font, c'est-à-dire que nos parents le font dans le passé. Les pratiques endogènes sont en voie de disparition. Et du coup, nous nous sommes dit qu'il est important de pouvoir agir aux côtés de ces populations-là pour renforcer leur capacité en adaptation. Et pour le faire, nous avons mis en place une ferme-école agroécologique sur une superficie de 3 hectares et de 6 hectares et demi, sur une superficie de 6 hectares et demi, où les femmes et les jeunes, les enfants viennent se former. Nous avons également le domaine environnement. Le domaine environnemental dans lequel nous travaillons, c'est que nous constatons aujourd'hui avec l'utilisation du bois de chauffe, les populations les forêts sont dégradées du fait qu'ils ont besoin de ce bois-là pour l'énergie, pour utiliser comme de l'énergie de chauffage. Et du coup, on assiste à une déforestation de nos communautés. Et du coup, cela réduit le risque de pluies régulières. Par exemple, chez nous, au nord de notre pays, nous n'avons que seulement 2 saisons, une qui est la saison sèche et l'autre qui est la saison longue, et la saison des pluies. Or, la saison sèche est plus longue que la saison des pluies. Et pendant ce temps, la population ne sait pas quoi faire, quelle activité mener durant la saison sèche. Et tout ceci est dû à l'irrégularité des pluies qui est due à la déforestation que nous avons remarquée au sein de nos communautés. Et du coup, il est important d'agir à travers la mise en place des plantations communautaires que nous reboisons, nous faisons des reboisements. Vous allez voir par après les images, et nous faisons des plantations pour reconstituer le couvert végétal et également planter les plantes fertilisantes. Ce sont des plantes qui donnent et qui jouent plutôt sur la restauration écologique de nos terres. Et en plus de cela, nous avons le volet entrepreneuriat social qui consiste à accompagner ces femmes agricultrices et ces jeunes en milieu rural sur les activités économiques pour leur permettre d'être financièrement autonomes. Et voilà, le diapo suivant. Voilà, donc voilà les activités que nous menons au sein de la communauté et sur la question de l'agriculture biologique durable. Voilà, vous pouvez voir les coopératives de femmes qui viennent se faire former, donc nous renforçons leurs capacités sur ces bonnes pratiques-là. Et en plus de cela, elles développent du maraîchage durant la saison sèche pour pouvoir améliorer leurs conditions de vie socio-économiques. L'image 4 montre comment nous formons les femmes et les jeunes sur la fabrication du compost. Le compost comme un substitut à l'utilisation de l'engrais chimique et ça aussi, ça rentre également dans l'amendement des sols et cultivables. Le diapo suivant. Et vous savez que nous utilisons, vous savez qu'en Afrique, l'agriculture est le secteur le plus développé, Or, c'est ce secteur aussi qui est le plus touché par les effets du changement climatique. et du coup, il est important de pouvoir agir. Dans le domaine de l'environnement, vous voyez, nous sommes en train de promouvoir la création des plantations communautaires et aussi les essences que nous reboisons plus, ce sont des espaces à bois énergie pour permettre à la population, pendant qu'ils sont en train de mener leur activité agricole, pendant qu'ils sont en train de faire leur champ, ils peuvent reboiser et en même temps, ces plans-là rentrent dans la restauration écologique des terres et au même moment servent également de bois, de chaux pour l'utilisation dans leur ménage. Nous faisons également la promotion des foyers améliorés. Ce sont des foyers, ce sont des énergies renouvelables qui sont aussi très importants comme solution face aux défis du changement climatique. Et nous travaillons également avec les enfants. Vous savez, nous avons compris qu'aujourd'hui, pour un changement de comportement dans le futur, il est important d'agir et d'agir avec la base, c'est-à-dire les enfants. Et du coup, le centre que nous avons mis en place accueille les enfants qui viennent se faire former pendant leurs vacances ou pendant les congés. Nous les formons sur l'environnement, comment protéger l'environnement. Nous les formons également sur les techniques de culture biologique et également nous les formons sur comment planter des arbres et l'importance des arbres dans la protection de notre planète. Et voilà, et durant 3 ou 4 jours, elles viennent apprendre toutes ces pratiques-là et qui les permet également de se rendre compte de la vulnérabilité et se rendre compte également de l'urgence en ce qui concerne le changement climatique. Et nous avons un programme aussi d'éducation à l'environnement dans les milieux scolaires que nous allons développer cette année dans les établissements dans les zones dans lesquelles nous travaillons pour continuer à avoir des jardins potagers et pour aller de façon plus pratique et sur ces solutions climatiques-là et au niveau des enfants. La suite. Voilà, le volet entrepreneuriat social, c'est des formations que nous faisons aux femmes sur leur activité génératrice de revenus. Je viens de le mentionner tout à l'heure que en milieu rural, vous savez, lorsque le temps de l'agriculture, la période des pluies de l'agriculture est passée, on rentre dans la période de sécheresse où c'est difficile aux communautés d'avoir des sources de revenus ou bien de mener une activité génératrice de revenus. Et du coup, nous avons pensé qu'il faut accompagner cette communauté-là en renforçant leur capacité sur les activités génératrices de revenus et les accompagner aussi dans la transformation de leurs produits agricoles. Et c'est ce qui a permis, par exemple, vous voyez sur les images, les femmes durant la saison des pluies développent sur des superficies les plantes aromatiques, comme par exemple le gingembre, le citronnelle, et en plus, ces plantes-là sont transformées en huiles essentielles. Donc, vous pouvez le constater, ce sont des huiles essentielles que ces femmes produisent et conditionnent dans des petites bouteilles et qui sont vendues sur le marché. Et en plus de cela, nous incluons également aussi comme autre AGR, nous avons l'élevage, parce que qui parle de l'agriculture parle de l'élevage. Du coup, on associe aussi à l'agriculture l'élevage et qui est une pratique aussi très écologique et très rentable pour l'agriculteur et en termes de rendement agricole. Et du coup, nous avons associé aussi et développé d'autres coopératives développent la production du savon, par exemple, et qui est une source de revenus. Au fait, tout ceci, c'est de permettre à la femme ou bien à cette coopérative de femmes d'être financièrement autonomes. Parce que c'est l'un des défis aussi et qui les rend plus vulnérables face au changement climatique. Et du coup, il est important d'agir sur ce côté-là en les emmenant à des initiatives économiques qui vont améliorer leurs conditions socio-économiques. Le diapo suivant. Et voilà, nous avons aussi, je crois, notre cher ami Chigozi l'avait mentionné, le volet énergie renouvelable. Nous intervenons également aussi sur ce domaine-là où nous facilitons aussi l'accès à l'eau potable à la population. Parce qu'en milieu rural, l'un des effets du changement climatique que nous remarquons aussi, c'est le manque d'eau potable. Pendant la saison sèche, quand vous arrivez dans les communautés, vous allez vous rendre compte que la plus grande difficulté pour ces populations, c'est le manque d'eau. Et le peu des sources de rivières qui sont là sont souvent aussi partagées avec le bétail, les animaux qui viennent boire, et par après, les hommes viennent aussi puiser la même eau pour boire, ce qui crée par après des problèmes de santé. Et pour agir, nous accompagnons, notre organisation OPAS accompagne ces populations-là en leur facilitant l'accès à l'eau potable. Et nous utilisons pour l'énergie solaire. Et ces panneaux solaires-là permettent de pouvoir pomper de l'eau, avoir de l'eau, et permettre à ces femmes de pouvoir non seulement l'utiliser dans leur ménage, mais aussi leur permettre de pouvoir faire des activités agricoles durant la saison sèche. C'est ça le jardin qu'elles font durant la saison sèche, parce qu'il y a l'eau, tant qu'il y a de l'eau, ils peuvent continuer leur activité agricole là. Et ça leur permet encore d'avoir une seconde source de revenus durant la saison sèche. Et aujourd'hui, vous savez, la pratique que nous promouvons plus au sein des communautés, ce sont des pratiques qui ont des liens étroits entre l'énergie, c'est-à-dire l'énergie solaire, l'eau et l'agriculture et la biodiversité. Ce qui veut dire que quoi? Vous obtenez de l'eau à base de l'énergie solaire que nous avons, et maintenant, cette eau permet non seulement aux populations d'avoir de l'eau potable pour leurs besoins, pour les ménages, mais ils ont de l'eau aussi pour pouvoir poursuivre leur activité agricole durant la saison sèche. Et ça, ce sont des pratiques d'adaptation face aux effets du changement climatique. Suivant. Et durant la saison sèche, nous promouvons également aussi les systèmes d'irrigation. Ce sont des systèmes d'irrigation qui facilitent l'arrosage et des cultures, des plantes aussi, qui permet à ces cultures d'avoir suffisamment de l'eau et de pouvoir produire, nous donner un bon rendement agricole. Et quelques chiffres que je vais partager avec vous. Vous savez, nous avons renforcé les capacités des femmes rurales, au moins 1050 femmes rurales sont renforcées à travers des formations, des sessions de formation théoriques et pratiques que nous faisons à l'endroit de ces femmes-là sur toutes les techniques agroécologiques, d'abord sur le changement climatique, sur toutes les techniques agroécologiques. Et nous avons reboisé 27 000 plants fertilisants pour lutter contre la dégradation des terres due à l'utilisation des produits chimiques. Et nous avons aussi plus de 55 hectares de terres dégradées qui sont restaurées à travers les bonnes pratiques que nous enseignons, que nous promouvons au sein des communautés avec les agriculteurs en milieu rural. Et les capacités de 300 femmes sont également renforcées aussi sur ces bonnes pratiques agroécologiques-là. Et actuellement, nous sommes en train de travailler également avec les jeunes. Et nous avons, dans le mois de mai, un forum que nous voulons lancer à l'endroit des jeunes. Et pendant 2 jours, ce forum va réunir les jeunes venus de différentes régions qui seront là et nous allons travailler avec eux sur le changement climatique et aussi les inciter pour leur implication dans le développement de leur communauté. En tant que jeune, qu'est-ce que je dois faire pour pouvoir lutter contre les effets du changement climatique qu'on observe dans nos communautés et également sur les questions liées aux EDD, parce qu'il est important aussi d'amener ces jeunes-là à comprendre et à les faire prendre conscience des conséquences néfastes de ces changements climatiques-là et les amener par après maintenant à un changement de comportement, à agir pour pouvoir lutter efficacement contre ce changement climatique que nous observons au sein de nos communautés. Le diapo suivant. Voilà, je vous remercie. Vous savez que le 8 mars dernier, le mercredi, c'est la journée internationale des droits de la femme. Et à notre ferme, nous avons aussi honoré cette journée-là et sous le terme encourager les innovations technologiques sensibles au genre. Et du coup, nous avons profité pour lancer notre programme de formation aux femmes, aux responsables des coopératives des femmes sur l'outil informatique. L'idée, c'est de les outiller, les amener également à se familiariser à l'outil informatique. Comment concilier les activités génétiques de revenus qu'elles font en utilisant l'informatique, la technologie pour promouvoir leurs activités. Et voilà et quelques images. Je vous remercie pour votre attention. Si vous avez des questions, nous sommes là et pour plus d'éclaircissement. Je vous remercie. Merci.
Thank you, Komi. That presentation was super informative, and I love how, you know, you're bringing entrepreneurship into your work with women and lifting up, you know, what they're already doing and their knowledge on, you know, sustainable practices as well. So now I'll turn to all of our panelists and I'll ask you one question with a follow-up question. Sadia, I'll start with you. What inspired you to do the work that you're doing today, and what gives you hope?
What inspired me? I guess I started as a student, and one thing that inspired me to work, that I grew up in a community where I didn't have all this information. I didn't have anyone who actually told me what my rights are as a young people. So I think that motivated me. And if I may share my climate story, once I had visited one of the villages in Khulna division, which is a coastal belt division in Bangladesh, and there is a district called, not the district, one of the villages called Tala. So in that Tala village, I met one woman. She was around 21-year-old, and she was married when she was 13. And she had already 3 children, and she was already, and at the time when I was talking to her, she was pregnant. So she shared that she was inviting me to her house for a lunch as a kind gesture, but she said, I can offer you lunch, but I cannot offer you water to drink. So that hit me differently. Like she has to walk around 15 kilometers every day, 15 and then way back to her home, another 15 kilometers, 30 kilometers with her pregnancy, just to bring drinking water for her family. And while she goes to that tube well to get that water, she actually is, she has to pass one of the markets while on her way. And in that market, she gets harassed by different people when she is fetching that water for her family. So I think that hit me really differently. And when I actually reflected all my work and all of our global work, that be it SDG, be it other indicators, be it other commitments, it was all lofty words for many of us, but it's the individual lives that we can actually have impact on the ground. That's the one that should be matter to us. So I think for that woman, I do what I do right now, and I'll keep doing it for the lifetime of mine.
Thank you so much for sharing that story, and thank you for all the work that you do. It's such important work. Chigozie, I'll go over to you then. What is the thing that inspired you to do the work that you do today, and what gives you hope?
Thanks for that. Well, I think that I think the gap that there is in the system is what actually inspired me itself. I mean, of course, growing up in an African country, Nigeria, very close to Togo, there was not really enough energy. The system And you see, it was causing a lot of drawbacks. You see, in development, in all indices of development, you can even imagine. So whether health, whether education, whether just comfort in general. You see, and then that inspiration and they inspired me to start to do work on energy first, and then along the way, also as some effects of climate change became known, and then it made sense to then dig deeper into renewable energies as a solution that can also have two-prong actions, like addressing energy issues, and at the same time also mitigating climate effects. So this is for me interesting, and of course going forward the hope is that the works continue, that we human beings live in a way that they achieve what they want in an economic sense, but at the same time being conscious of the environment and also being socially aware.
Thank you. I think those three pillars of the social, economic, and environment are crucial, not only in sustainability, but just in living a healthy and prosperous life too. Thank you for that. Comey, I'll ask you the same question as well. What inspired you to do the work that you do today, and what gives you hope for the future?
Merci beaucoup et pour cette question. Vous savez, nous sommes des fils de paysans et nous avons plus grandir en milieu rural. Et pendant l'enfance, nous avons été éduqués et à travers les papas et mamans qui sont des agriculteurs, et c'est la seule activité économique qu'elles font pour vraiment prendre à charge et nous éduquer. Mais pendant ce temps, on se rend compte qu'au même moment aussi que nos mamans vont au champ, elles cultivent, à la fin des saisons, elles ont des bonnes récoltes, elles arrivent à vendre et gagner de l'argent et pour nous aider, nous scolariser et autres. Mais aujourd'hui, vous allez voir que quand vous rentrez dans les milieux ruraux, ce n'est plus ça. La réalité est différente. Aujourd'hui, en milieu rural, c'est toujours l'agriculture qui est là, mais cette agriculture ne nourrit pas exactement les agriculteurs son homme. Difficilement, à la fin des saisons, les paysans arrivent à gagner du fruit de leur récolte, vendre, avoir de l'argent pour subvenir aux besoins de leurs enfants. C'est difficile. Parce qu'à la fin de la saison, on se rend compte qu'avec les changements climatiques, peut-être qu'il n'y a pas eu la pluie, il y a eu des sécheresses, toutes les récoltes sont mortes, et du coup, à la fin de la saison, ils n'ont rien. Maintenant, pour survivre à la maison, le manger, c'est difficile. Face à ces constants, je me suis dit, il est important de pouvoir agir. Avec toutes les connaissances que nous avons, il est important d'abord de travailler surtout au niveau de la base. C'est pour ça que nous sommes retournés à la base pour travailler avec ces populations à la base, pour leur faire comprendre l'importance et également aussi de la situation dans laquelle nous vivons. Parce que beaucoup ne savent pas que c'est le changement climatique. Parce que dans d'autres raisons, au même moment, ils mènent des activités qui sont contre et les bonnes pratiques et qui accentuent le changement climatique. Et du coup, il faut les faire comprendre, non, c'est parce que vous n'utilisez pas avant ça, mais aujourd'hui, vous utilisez ça, vous voyez les conséquences. C'est pour ça qu'il y a telles conséquences. Avant, nous avons des arbres. Maintenant, aujourd'hui, nous coupons tous ces arbres-là. Où sera la pluie? Il n'y a pas la pluie, tout ça là. Et les amener à un changement de comportement. Et c'est ce qui nous a motivés à aller. Et d'ailleurs, même avec les demandes que nous avons, c'est ce qui nous a permis de mettre en place cette ferme école-là pour continuer le renforcement des capacités des femmes sur ces bonnes pratiques-là. Voilà, je vous remercie.
Thank you for sharing that and all the work that you do as well. I have a follow-up question. So for all of you, in the work that you do, you are leaders in and of yourselves. How do you bring along other women or youth or people who have been underrepresented in the spaces that you operate in? How have you been able to kind of bring other leaders along with you in your journey? And anyone can answer first.
Maybe I can start. How do you bring leaders around the table? I think it's also the communication of what you do. Yeah, so I think trying to make it, bring it out there, to people that they actually really then understand what you do, why you're doing it. And then once you bring people on the table and they are really passionate about, they understand and they get to understand and they can get the chance to also then be more involved and passionate about you do. And then another thing is also communication. I mean, what kind of communication style do you use? I mean, of course, you use different communication styles to get to different people, depending on their sector, right? I mean, if you go to the communities, the way you would communicate with the people in the communities wouldn't be the same way you would communicate to government or technocrats at the national level. And also, so I think the communication style has to be very strategic. And also we have to also be, make sure that we also continue to bring people around the table and to make sure that that table increasingly becomes diverse in terms of gender, in terms of social class, in terms of geographies, that this table becomes to be more and more diverse. Thanks.
Yeah, I can go next. So in terms of engaging young people, one thing we always prioritize that to ensure meaningful youth engagement. So by meaningful youth engagement, we make sure that we are engaging young people meaningfully and equally in processes that we are taking up to for designing any program. Liberalization. Those were engaged equally, and they actually led the entire process. And also, this was one of the fundamentals that whichever youths are being engaged in our organization, when they have to be engaged. And after that, one thing we prioritize to work with local organizations and local organizations, both organizations, focused organizations. We all, as a national organization, engage with those local organizations, so we can have those local voices heard in the national level, and also when it's a strategy as well. Like when the local people are actually connecting their daily life to the people living in that area, it's actually the language, the culture. So it gets easier to conceptualize and contextualize any program or activity. And it's also meaningful that people feel safe that seeing one of the local organizations talking about their rights and the issues they're facing. So this has been two of the strategies to engage young people. And countries like Bangladesh, actually, there are two scenarios that you can easily identify young people who has the privilege, who has that network and platforms to present themselves, and there are people who actually doesn't have that opportunity. So we actually work with both of the channels where we can actually utilize the existing young leaders and young people who has the knowledge and who has been vocal in their communities, and also the young people who doesn't know about their rights and would be and their voices also were groomed to be reflected in national levels. So yeah, this has been most of the strategies.
Merci beaucoup. Et pour ma part, je dirais que la stratégie, vous savez, aujourd'hui, la majorité des populations sont conscientes du phénomène du changement climatique. Mais le petit souci, c'est comment s'adapter et qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire pour changer la donne. C'est là, nous intervenons et nous leur faisons croire que non, ce que vous observez, par exemple, ce que vous-même vous voyez, ce que nous vivons dans notre communauté, c'est dû à ceci et à cela. Maintenant, pour le faire, il faut agir, il faut mener telle action pour pouvoir changer la situation. Et vous savez, ce qui est intéressant aussi, c'est que aujourd'hui, avec l'État, il y a des politiques qui sont mises en place, des documents qui sont là. Par exemple, la contribution déterminée au niveau national, notre CDN qui est là, qui a défini tout un plan de mécanismes et de projets. Maintenant, il faut aller à la mise en œuvre de ces politiques. Et du coup, quand vous rentrez dans la communauté, les autorités locales dans chaque communauté sont conscients et savent ces politiques-là qui existent. Maintenant, lorsqu'il y a une initiative qui rentre dans la mise en œuvre de ces politiques-là, c'est des autorités qui sont prêtes pour accompagner le travail pour vraiment qu'on assiste à un changement de comportement. Et la communauté tout entière, vous savez, quand vous voulez mener ce genre d'activité et que vous n'impliquez pas la communauté dès le départ, vous allez voir que ça ne peut pas marcher. Mais une fois, comme on le dit, une fois que vous les expliquez le bien fondé, le pourquoi il faut faire ceci, comment il faut le faire, pour quel résultat qu'on veut avoir, je crois qu'elles sont prêtes et elles sont aptes pour pouvoir accompagner le travail que vous faites. Et c'est tout ça là, parce que les questions du changement climatique n'est pas seulement une affaire d'une seule personne, d'un individu, mais une affaire de tous les acteurs réunis, y compris les populations à la base, y compris nous qui sommes les acteurs de développement, y compris maintenant les autorités aussi. Donc, c'est tout un travail qui implique tout acteur et à des différents niveaux donnés. Et voilà, c'est la seule stratégie que nous mettons en œuvre pour pouvoir mener nos activités sur le terrain. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. What I heard from you all is really that you need to invite more people to the table, both those with privilege and those who have resources and those who are under-resourced and haven't been invited to the table. And also really focus on centering the narrative around the fact that local leaders and local community members are experts in what they do already. They are on the forefront of experiencing climate change. They know what's happening, but it's more so about how we can act on behalf of everyone in the global community, but particularly focused on those who are really most impacted. How can we best support them through policy changes, through advocacy, through the work that we do every day, and how can we continue to center that narrative and those people who are most impacted? We only have about 2 minutes left, but if you have any quick last final takeaways, I would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I just want to say from me, just a quick thank you to everyone, for you, Carissa and your team, and for everyone who also played a role in making this come up. I think this is a really interesting cross-sectoral discussion that needs to happen more often. Sometimes these discussions are happening in silos, but I think that we need to begin to, continue to have them in a more comprehensive and interconnected way that we're doing now. And also thank you to my fellow panelists who are also gave very, very interesting insights. Over.
Thank you. In a takeaway, I just want to say that those who joined this webinar, thank you for joining. And wherever we are working, I saw one of the participants from Bangladesh. She works in a bank, and I think it's good to engage different stakeholders of the system. Then we can actually act together. So I request, if you're a donor, if you're a or private sector participants, or if you're a government employee, or you're from NGO, please try to start engaging young people in all of your capacities and try to be meaningful. And I know there has been one of the challenges that in the era of youth engagement, we actually there is a lot of tokenism. I really didn't want to mention that word, but yeah. So we don't want young people as a token on the table. Let's make sure that those are meaningful engagements, and we are investing in young people, and we are connecting the locally led movements and organizations as well. So, yeah.
Merci beaucoup. Et pour ma part, je ne peux que vous remercier. Merci à Carissa pour l'organisation. Merci à tout le monde. Merci aux différents partenaires qui ont permis cette conférence. Et nous pensons qu'il est important, effectivement, ces gens de partage pour voir ce qui se fait de par le monde entier en ce qui concerne les pratiques d'adaptation face au changement climatique. Et donc, je crois que nous ne pouvons que vous remercier. Et nous saisissons également, comme je viens de le dire, l'affaire du changement climatique nous interpelle tous. Ce n'est pas une affaire d'une seule personne, ce n'est pas une affaire d'une partie, mais c'est une affaire de nous tous. Et chacun a un rôle très important à jouer, tout comme les partenaires financiers aussi qui sont là pour accompagner ces actions que nous menons au sein des communautés, en faveur des communautés. Donc, c'est important aussi qu'il faut le souligner parce que sans cela, nous ne pouvons pas arriver vraiment à un grand changement. Et nous remercions tout le monde et nous espérons vivement que ces sessions se prolongent parce que nous venons à peine de démarrer l'année. Nous avons encore beaucoup de mois devant nous. Ce serait très intéressant qu'on ait encore des sessions comme ça pour partager des expériences au niveau de chaque communauté. Et je crois que c'est ensemble qu'on peut construire. Je vous remercie.
Thank you all. And I just wanted to thank you one last time to all of our panelists, Chigozie, Sadia, and Komi. Thank you so much for spending time today and sharing your insights and your leadership and continuing to do this work. And thank you to my colleagues, Yusuf and Ayana, for your support on the back end of things. I know that, these are early mornings, but it's worthwhile for sure. And then lastly, thank you to our conference organizers and also our interpreters. Without you all, this wouldn't have happened. So thank you all, and I hope that you all have a great rest of your day.